If I started opening Riftbound TCG product today, how many booster packs or other card sources and how much money would it take me to build a top-tier meta deck? That and assorted smaller satellite questions is what I'll be trying to answer in this video using data that I laboriously dug up and a little bit of science. I'm Simon from Games Deconstructed, and let's get started. Point number 1 is going to be establishing our criteria for success. I mentioned that we will be trying to build a meta deck, but Riftbound being a very young game as I'm making this video, our idea of what a deck like that might look like seems to be a bit hazy. So what I've done is I've assembled 10 sample lists, each for a different legend, which are kind of the game's equivalent of classes if you're not familiar. Each of these lists has appeared in the top 8 of a tournament somewhere, either in person in China like the Hangzhou Regional, or online like the Runes & Rift weekly tournament series. I'm going for variety here, since before the meta has solidified, it's equally likely that any of these lists has a chance of being the top dog. So it's not just going to be Kai'Sa, which seems like the most likely one at the moment. So that's our decks. We will be delving back into these in a bit, but now let's learn what our methods of card acquisition in Riftbound actually are. As of the release of the first set, Origins, there are 3 main methods of card acquisition that we have at our disposal. The first and most obvious one are boosters, or if you want to translate it back from the Polish you'll find on Riot's official merch website, thrusters. You'll find 14 cards in each, 13 of which are real cards, and 1 is a rune, the game's kind of land equivalent, or a token, the game's token equivalent. Out of the 13, 7 will be commons, 3 will be uncommons, and 2 will be rare or better. And the or better hides behind it the game's last rarity. Epic. Your rares have a chance to upgrade to an epic at a rate of about 1 in every 4 boosters. So considering there's 2 rares per booster, each of them has a 12.5% chance of upgrading to an epic, and yes, you can have 2 epics a pack if you're mad lucky. So this gives you an expected rate of about 1.75 rares and 0.25 epics per pack. The last card slot, since the above sum up to 12, is a guaranteed foil card. This can be of any rarity, and since the official Riftbound account has ghosted me when I asked them about the exact rarity split in that slot, I will have to assume that it's about the same as the distribution of the other 12 slots. So a 7 in 12 chance of seeing a common, and so on and so forth. You can see my assumed distribution on screen right now. The going rate for these boosters, assuming you buy them from the official Riot merch store and in a display of 24, is $4.99 a pop. Now, I'm fully aware that the price you will actually have to pay at your local game store may differ from that, especially with the allocation issues and scalping being a problem. So whenever I'm talking about price, I'm going to be giving both a dollar amount as well as a unit I'm calling booster equivalents, or Bs.
But we can be Bs. This is good news.
If I say something costs 2 Bs, you can just substitute whatever you would pay for a booster for that, and that's going to be the cash amount. So that's boosters. Our first alternative to them is going to be a starter set called Proving Grounds. It includes 4 starter decks, plus some bonus bits like these cute acrylic standees, game boards and the like, which don't really matter for our deck completion. But the decks in there are complete Riftbound decks. The one caveat being that they have just 1 battlefield each, so they are 42 cards instead of the usual 44. And yes, you're right, person in the comments, nominally Riftbound decks are 40 cards, but you still need 3 battlefields and a legend card from somewhere, you cannot play without them, so for collection purposes and for our purposes, a Riftbound deck is 44 cards. Out of these 168 cards, 110 are common, 27 are uncommon, 13 are rare, and 18 are epic. It's priced at 30 USD or 6 Bs, so for the quantity of cards, it already seems like a good deal. And 18 epics is a great rate for Rarity. You would expect to see about 1.5 of these if you spend that money on 6 boosters instead. Unfortunately, the majority of these cards don't really see play in any of our 10 sample lists. Out of the 168, only 59 copies of the cards in Proving Grounds are playable anywhere among those 10 lists. 44 of them common, 11 uncommon, 3 rare, and 1 epic. Out of the remaining ones, some of them may eventually see play, some of them may be viable substitutions if you wanted to mess with our stock lists, and some of them are Garen and belong in a special place in your heart and nowhere else. Our last option for card acquisition is one of these 3 starter decks, each for a different legend, between Victor, Lee Sin, and Jinx. You'll find a full 44 card deck in each, plus a free booster for the price of 19.99 USD or 4 Bs. But since a booster is included inside, that bumps the net cost down to 3 Bs. So let's see if the contents are 3B worthy. Each of these decks consists of mostly commons in the high 20s, and from 11 to 16 uncommons and 4 or 5 rares. No epics here, I'm afraid. In terms of how many of them are playable, 27 copies of cards from the Lee deck, 17 commons, 9 uncommons, 1 rare, 23 from Jinx, 13 commons, 9 uncommons, 1 rare, and 22 from Victor, 14 commons, 6 uncommons, 2 rares. So now that we are forearmed with the knowledge of where cards come from and what their rarities are, let's come back to our 10 decks with a bit more scrutiny. Here's the rarity distributions for our lists. We can see that thankfully a majority of the cards we'll need will be commons, followed by uncommons, and the average deck will play between 8 and 9 rares and roughly 6 epics, though the range on that last one is quite large. For example, the Yasuo deck plays just 1 epic, Invert Timelines, whereas Volibear plays 12, so we will probably not be building that last one. Much like in my analysis of MTG Arena's monetization, you can find a link to that on screen right now if you wanna open that up for later, I expect the highest rarity will be our main roadblock in this process, so epics will be the biggest gate we will have to go through. The rate of 1 per 4 packs seems quite strict, and the pool of over 50 unique ones means that we will have a difficult job ahead of us if we want to get a specific one, not to mention a playset of a specific one. What I could do now is wait a week or two, get my hands on large quantities of Riftbound sealed product, open that up for your viewing pleasure, and see which decks we can build out of the cards I get. But apart from that being potentially physically impossible based on what I've heard about product allocation to my LGS, it wouldn't really tell us much. Because my luck, or lack thereof, opening boosters wouldn't really tell us anything about what epics and how many of them you can expect if you opened that same quantity of boosters. It also wouldn't allow us to compare which products of the ones that I've mentioned are the most worth buying. So what we'll do instead is make use of a bit of science magic called a Monte Carlo simulation, which stands for simulating a thing a huge number of times and seeing what happens. So much like the legend card Victor Herald of the Arcane, I will be exhausting myself to create a huge number of little robots. These robots will be opening booster packs and other types of product, pulling random cards at the rates that I just described, adding them to their little robot collections, and seeing if they have enough of these simulated cards to complete one of the decks on our list. If they do, they'll take detailed notes of which deck that was, how many boosters they opened, and so on and so forth. And then we will add up all these notes to see a more representative sample of what we, flesh and bone players, can expect if we attempted the same process. So I pulled the data for all the cards in our decks, another list of all cards available in the first set divided by rarity, and got to work coding up the booster cracking robots. So soon they were done, their data collected, and as I started delving into that data, a tragic truth became revealed to me. So let's take a look at the data so we might share in that truth together. Our first 500 robots followed a very simple strategy. They began with a blank collection and started immediately cracking packs. What you see in front of you is a histogram. The horizontal axis, the one that goes from left to right, is how many packs were opened before a deck was completed. The y-axis, or the height of the bar, shows us how many robots required exactly that many boosters to complete their first deck. And you can probably tell that this is looking a bit horrid. Our median score, which is an average that's less thrown off by extreme values, is 199 boosters opened to complete a deck fully. The actual range here between the unluckiest and the luckiest robot is between 94 and 701 boosters opened. Since there's no duplicate protection in physical card games, you could very well go chasing that last epic that you need, booster by booster, well into infinity. So, learning that it takes somewhere between 90 and 700 boosters to assemble a meta deck doesn't seem especially useful to me, so let's delve a bit deeper into that data. What I found is that the most problematic part of getting that deck built is the last couple of cards, usually the last remaining epics. So let's overlay another histogram onto our first one and see how many boosters my bots needed to get a deck to 90% completion. That's 40 cards out of the 44. Median here is 90 boosters. So in a vast majority of situations, it took them less time to build 90% of a deck than it required to assemble that last percent. Much like RuneScape leveling, so I'm told. Take note of this, it will come up later. The time to build 90% of a deck, not RuneScape leveling. Another metric I thought of calculating is how long it takes to have all the cards of a given rarity for at least one deck. You know, how many boosters until we have all the commons for something. Not necessarily what we'll ultimately end up building, but just for something. And here's a table showing the medians for all these levels. Roughly 38 boosters to get common complete, 65 for uncommons, 76 for rares, 106 for epics. The fact that median epic completion is not close to median total completion highlights our main problem here, which is a lack of direction. You might be epic complete for Yasuo, after all he only needs one epic on, let's say, booster 100, and you may be simultaneously rare complete for Annie, but not for Yasuo. That doesn't mean you have a complete deck, it means you have most of two decks. And those completion values are not interchangeable. Now I wanted to see if we would get different data if we got our robots to make different purchasing decisions. So I got 250 bots each to simulate these categories. The first 250 bought Proving Grounds and then boosters. Another category was bots buying a single starter deck and then boosters. That's 250 for each starter. Then the category of buying Proving Grounds followed by a single starter deck. Also 250 each for each starter Proving Grounds combo. Bear in mind that each of these starts costs a different number of Bs. And that's been reflected in the data. So for the Proving Grounds start, it starts from a floor of 6 Bs. And with this much data, it might be better for me to show as a table. The total booster equivalents needed for deck completion for each category are pretty much identical. You will see some values in the table differ ever so slightly between 202 and 227 boosters, but these are pretty much meaningless differences with the scale that we're working with here. We would expect 68% of our values to fall between 120 and 280, assuming this is a normal distribution, which it probably is not. These fall within a tenth of that, so it's really a cosmetic difference. And it makes sense, if our biggest gatekeeper is epics, none of these starting products provide more than a single playable one, so in the long run it's not going to matter that much which one you start with. The total spread within the 2250 robots analyzed is as follows. The lowest number of boosters required was 55, the highest 787. Taking a look at the other metrics, the theory that 90% completion takes less boosters to achieve than the remaining 10% held fast for each product combination, with values between 93 and 101. Also pretty much no impact of product choice on that metric. For rarity completion, it follows the same progression we've already seen. It takes the smallest number of boosters to be common complete, between 39 and 46, followed by 53 to 71 for uncommons, 75 to 91 for rares, and about 1 and 10, 135 for epics. One element that did catch my eye is that the Jinx plus Proving Grounds combo was notably faster in achieving uncommon completion than most of the other categories. And I dug into the data and did confirm that there is a statistically significant difference in the speed of achieving uncommon completion for that choice specifically. The likely reason behind that is out of the 13 uncommons played in our sample Teemo deck, the Jinx starter plus Proving Grounds combo includes 9 of them guaranteed. And finally, to put a point on how wasteful the process of opening boosters to chase that last epic is, our robots ended up having more than the required playset of 3 for about 220 individual cards. So they were virtually guaranteed to have more copies of every common and uncommon than they'd ever use in a single deck. In terms of which decks were built, 49% of the decks that the robots got to 100% were Yasuo, 28.8% were Ahri, 11% were Teemo, 4.5% were Annie, with the others in the single digits, and Volibear and Yi never built. And this of course maps very well on how many epics each of these decks require. Yasuo only plays 1, Ahri plays 2, Teemo plays 3, and Annie plays 4. So as I theorized before, it's epics that are the biggest roadblock. So that might seem a bit doom and gloom, but let me try to put those findings in a bit more of a cheerful context. But before I do, it would be awesome if you clicked that subscribe button. It's a great way to help the channel for free, and I will appreciate it. So these numbers may be true, provided you are building a 1-to-1 carbon copy of a list in a vacuum, which I'm assuming you're not. However, if that is the case, the median that you would require is an investment of 209 booster equivalents, or just over $1,000. And the actual you'll see will probably fall somewhere between 55 and 800 boosters, so that median really isn't telling you much. However, there is 2 tools at your disposal that can make this situation infinitely better, and ensure that my findings are more of a ceiling rather than a floor. The first is making substitutions. In my analysis, I was beholden to attempting to complete 100% replicas of these tournament decks, but you don't have that limitation. You may make certain substitutions for cards you don't have. Some of these may be a trade-off of reliability, of deck power, but they very well may not be. Hell, with the meta being as fresh as it is, you might end up with a deck that's better than the ones I picked if you're a good deck builder. And if you recall, the closer we got to the end in our simulations, the harder it became to make progress, so just substituting 1 or 2 or 3 cards is going to make a major difference. The other technique is making use of the T in TCG and trading for cards you need with your local community, or I guess buying singles. The process of cracking packs to look for specific cards generates a lot of waste, in the form of cards you don't need or cards you already have enough of. If you're able to trade these for cards that you do need, or sell them and buy singles of the cards you need, it's going to shorten the process of getting your deck online considerably. And remember, the last 4 cards taking as long as the first 40 theory that we've discussed comes into play here as well. So, to sum up, it doesn't ultimately matter that much which of the Riftbound products you start with if you're attempting to build a meta deck. A much bigger factor is going to be your luck opening packs, how effective you are at trading, and how willing to make substitutions you are. Feel free to pick a starting product that gives you an enjoyable way to start the game, or that contributes to a specific deck or strategy that you want to play, rather than just a competitive deck. And in terms of rarity impact, the biggest hurdle are going to be the epics, combining a low pool rate with a rather large pool. So the hardest decks to assemble and the ones where it's going to be the most expensive to buy singles for are going to be the ones with a lot of epics. If you're a prospective Rift bandit, let me know which legend you're most excited to play with. Otherwise, I've been Simon from Games Deconstructed. Thanks a lot to the Patreon supporters over on patreon.com/gamesdeconstructed, especially Maciej Majka, Good Luck, and ASAS. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.